In 1947, in the hills of Qumran, a Bedouin shepherd was exploring caves when he discovered jars of pottery filled with rolled scrolls. Little did he know what he had discovered would become one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Around 900 unique items were found as scrolls or fragments of parchment, and over 200 of them were biblical texts. What's more, they found fragments from every book of the Bible, well, except for Esther. The scrolls dated to between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, making them over 1,000 years older than our earliest copies of the Masoretic Text, which is our oldest complete copy of the Hebrew Bible. We don't know much about the community that produced them, but the prevailing view is that they were a Jewish sect called the Essenes. Around 45% of the texts are close to the Hebrew Masoretic Text. Around 5% align with the Samaritan Pentateuch, 5% with the Septuagint, and 45% are unaligned, meaning they don't line up neatly with any of our existing traditions. When we examine the writings, there are some very interesting differences to the Masoretic Text. In this video, we're going to look at some of the most significant differences and explore why scribes made those changes. Let's start with an example where scribes edited out polytheistic references. In Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 to 9, the NIV follows the Masoretic Text and reads, "When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance." But the NRSV uses the older Dead Sea Scrolls and includes a note that the translation Most High is Elyon in Hebrew. And instead of the sons of Israel, we find reference to the gods, plural. Most text critics agree that the Dead Sea Scrolls preserve an older polytheistic worldview. Emmanuel Tove explains that Elyon, or El, is not the Yahweh of the Hebrews, rather the chief god El from the Canaanite and Ugaritic pantheon of gods. So in this text, Elyon divided up the nations and apportioned them to various gods, the sons of El. Yahweh received the family of Jacob as his share of the inheritance. Other scholars have tried to mediate this a little, suggesting that Yahweh is the Most High, but that he had a divine council of heavenly beings, the sons of El, and while he kept Israel for himself, he divided up the other nations to his heavenly council. Either way, a scribe at some point felt uncomfortable with the polytheistic imagery here of multiple divine beings, so they removed the sons of El and changed it to the sons of Israel. Here's Dead Sea Scrolls expert Dr. Kipp Davis to explain more.
Scholars tend to agree that Deuteronomy 32, it's a standalone text. This is a very, very old text. Predates probably everything else in the book of Deuteronomy. Some scholars have suggested, I tend to think that this may have been the earliest core part of the book of Deuteronomy. So it's right away a very old poem. It's one of the oldest texts in the entire Hebrew Bible. It's not the oldest, but it's, one of them. So it's preserving this very, very old idea, this old idea that's reflected in the literature and the ideology from a bunch of their neighbors, from the people surrounding the Israelites and the Judahites who are living in the region in, the 7th, the 8th, 7th, 6th century BCE. At some point, a Jewish scribe looking at this text decided that his solution would be just to eliminate the sons of God or the sons of the gods altogether and replace this with the sons of Israel. In his mind, eliminating the problem of polytheism.
The same thing occurs at the end of the chapter 2. In Deuteronomy 32:43, the Dead Sea Scrolls read, Praise, O heavens, his people. Worship him, all you gods. Again, this presupposed the existence of multiple divine beings. But the Masoretic text reads, Rejoice, you nations, with his people. At some point, the polytheistic reference to heavens and gods has been removed by a scribe. Here, the Dead Sea Scrolls likely preserve the older reading. Now let's look at the Great Isaiah Scroll, referred to technically as 1Q Isaiah A, a nearly complete copy of the Book of Isaiah. But it wasn't the only one. A second Isaiah scroll called 1Q Isaiah B was also found in pretty good condition. So there are two Isaiah scrolls which we can compare with the Masoretic text. The less complete 1Q Isaiah B has around 183 textual variants. That's differences in words to the Masoretic text. While that seems like a lot, it's actually a pretty small number compared to the older 1Q Isaiah A, which has over 2,600 variants. Now, many of these variants can be explained by scribes updating language, and they don't substantially change the meaning of the text, but some variants are more significant. Take Isaiah chapter 2, verses 9 to 11.
The Masoretic text reads, So humankind is humbled and everyone brought low. Do not forgive them. Enter into the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of Yahweh and from the glory of his majesty. The haughty eyes of humankind will be brought low, and human pride will be humbled. Yahweh alone will be exalted on that day. The Isaiah scroll, the Great Isaiah scroll, is just missing this entire middle chunk of text. So what has happened at one point in time or another, it appears as though a scribe has added this chunk of text. Don't forgive them. Enter into the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of Yahweh and from the glory of his majesty. A common explanation from scholars is that that particular little bit that was added there was included probably at some point in time, maybe in the Hellenistic period, during the Hasmonean Revolt, or even during tensions in the Roman period, where somebody is feeling this apocalyptic sort of anxiety about the onset of the last days, basically calling on God to, abstain from forgiving his enemies and to unleash all of his wrath against them. To my eyes and ears, that makes a pretty substantial difference to the meaning of the text.
The Great Isaiah Scroll also provides evidence of how mistakes in the copying process could cause texts to develop over time. Let's take a close look at one section to illustrate. You don't need to be able to read ancient Hebrew to see what's going on here. This is a section of Isaiah between chapters 34 and 35. Most of the writing looks the same size, and then it looks like a scribe has squeezed in several lines in small writing. The original scribe had left a gap. A later scribe has filled in this gap with text that is close to the Masoretic text, but with some variations. Scholars initially thought this was evidence of an earlier version of Isaiah that did not contain these verses. However, more recent scholarship has shown that these sort of additions happen in a regular pattern throughout the second half of the Great Isaiah Scroll. It looks like the scribe was actually copying from a scroll that was damaged at the bottom, so he left gaps where the scroll was damaged. A later scribe filled in the missing verses, but they made mistakes, and it appears that at times they were working from memory. This is significant physical evidence of the kinds of scribal practices that could occur, and while this is only one example, similar practices were probably occurring for hundreds of years.
When we're looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're looking at manuscripts from a roughly 250-year period. So this is a snapshot in time of this one Jewish community and the kinds of manuscripts that they are circulating. It's representative, I think, of what's going on more broadly in the period and over a longer period of time too, right? Like, they didn't just start doing this stuff, in the 2nd or the 1st century BCE.
Now, what about a passage that was lost for 2,000 years? The Dead Sea Scroll 4Q Samuel A preserves a short episode about the Ammonite king Nahash, who gouged out the eyes of his enemies. This was missing from all our ancient translations, except the Jewish historian Josephus knew about it. We wouldn't know that it was originally in the text if it weren't for the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can now read it in the NRSV at the end of 1 Samuel 10. The Dead Sea Scrolls also show us that there were multiple versions of several books of the Hebrew Bible prior to the Masoretic Text. The Dead Sea Scrolls preserve sections of Exodus and Numbers that include additional lines and paragraphs throughout. These are actually very close to the Samaritan Pentateuch versions of these books. Scholars used to think that the Samaritan Pentateuch added all these bits, but thanks to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we know that there were likely multiple Hebrew versions of these books in antiquity. Similarly, the Great Psalms scroll found in Qumran is very different to the Book of Psalms you'll find in the Masoretic Text. The order of the hymns is very different, and there's new hymns not found in the Masoretic Text. Eugene Ulrich explains how the scrolls reveal that there is no compelling order to the Masoretic form of the Psalter, and that the numbering system of the Psalter is late. The Dead Sea Scrolls show us how multiple versions of Hebrew books of the Bible existed in the ancient world, and served different communities. For some books, there wasn't necessarily one standard version.
One of the things that the discovery of all these biblical manuscripts has done for the study of textual criticism is it's pushed scholars more and more away from this idea that there is an ur text, as it's been called. That's the idea of there being an original text that all these other versions sprang out of, and that with enough text critical work, we can get back to that original text somewhere in the reaches of the distant past. Scholars tend not to go about the work in that same way anymore. Text critical scholars tend more to think of the text as something that was always contested by various communities who were collecting them, and that these collections were in conversation with one another. The Septuagint will preserve the older reading in some cases, whereas the Masoretic text will preserve the older reading, whereas the Samaritan Pentateuch will preserve the older reading. It's not always consistent, right? And one of the reasons for that is because these things are all developing alongside one another at the same time. And it effectively really muddies the water in terms of attempting to arrive at an original text or an ur text, to the point where most scholars have just given up on that and much prefer to talk about just how the text that we have was always something that was in development and something that was in contention.
Different communities used different texts and translations to suit their needs in different times and places. Some Jews in antiquity used Aramaic translations, some Hebrew, and others used Greek translations, each with their own characteristics. Over time, the Masoretic text won out among Jews. The authors of the New Testament and the earliest Christians preferenced the Septuagint, until Latin translations of the Hebrew took priority, starting in the 5th century CE. Now, with the exception of direct translations from the Masoretic Text or the Septuagint, most modern English translations of the Hebrew Bible are a composite translation from a reconstructed text. They will use the Masoretic Text as a base, but there might be a word from the Septuagint here, a phrase from the Dead Sea Scrolls there, and so on. And that concludes our introduction to textual variants in the Hebrew Bible and the field of textual criticism. I hope you've learned something new about how ancient scribes transmitted texts and the complexities behind modern translations of the world's most famous written work. This 3-part series was made possible by the American Academy of Religion and the Henry Luce Foundation. I'm planning to continue this series for the New Testament, but I need your help by supporting the channel on Patreon. You can help fund videos like this, which make complex scholarship on religion and the Bible accessible to all. Also, don't forget to check out more of Dr. Kipp Davis's work over on his YouTube channel. My name is Lachlan, and you've been watching Tablets and Temples.